117,078 acres. That's the size of a single wildfire burning in Washington state right now, and it's only one of 3 massive fires. These fires just forced the governor to request and receive a federal emergency declaration. 8 days ago, this fire didn't even exist. Right now, it's larger than the city of Chicago. Here's the number I want you watching, and it isn't the acreage. It's the containment percentage, because that tells you whether firefighters are actually gaining ground or whether it's simply outrunning them. The largest is the Sinlahekin Fire in Okanogan County. It started on July 26th, caused by lightning, and sits at just 9% contained. More than 1,560 personnel are currently assigned to it, and the suppression cost has already reached $12 million. Here's what makes this fire different. It isn't just burning trees and brush. It has directly threatened critical state-owned infrastructure. It threatens dams, wastewater plants, and microwave communication sites, along with university radio infrastructure and the Tonasket police headquarters. It has also damaged a major power transmission line, cutting supply to roughly half of Okanogan County. This is about essential functionality. Level 1 means be aware. Level 2, be ready, means have vehicles packed. Level 3, leave now, is the most urgent tier. By August 1st, winds pushed the fire east toward Highway 7. Evacuation orders west of the river were upgraded straight to Level 3. The town of Tonasket remained at Level 2, its residents packed and ready. A shelter was set up at the Community Cultural Center. One photograph captured the moment, the American flag still flying over the Tonasket Memorial, smoke from the fire filling the sky behind it. Despite the damage, officials have not attributed any loss of life to this event. All 14 people listed as unaccounted for were located safe. The growth timeline is striking. It started as a small lightning strike on July 26th in remote terrain. Within 1 week, it reached 73,794 acres. 4 days later, it grew by another 43,000 acres, an area larger than San Francisco. A particularly dangerous situation. Red flag warning saw gusts reach 50 miles an hour, doubling the fire's size in just 24 hours. Governor Ferguson spoke with the president and FEMA about the situation, marking how seriously this fire season is being treated federally. We'll keep you updated as this continues to develop. Subscribing costs nothing and ensures you stay informed on this critical story. The Sinlahekin Fire isn't burning alone either. The Kaiser Canyon Fire on the eastern Washington border with Idaho has burned 136,113 acres. It's actually further along in containment at 48%. Meanwhile, the Little Giant Fire in east central Washington has burned more than 70,000 acres. It currently sits at 0% containment. Add those 3 fires together and more than 300,000 acres are actively burning across eastern Washington. 2 more fires round out the picture. The Fairview fire has already destroyed roughly 700 structures and threatened major infrastructure. This includes Bonneville Power Administration transmission lines, railway infrastructure, and vital farmland. The scale of the threat is immense. The Bradine Hill fire near Colville has burned over 5,000 acres with 0 containment as of the most recent report. It's worth being specific about the Spokane area situation, because it's technically 3 separate fires being coordinated together. The combined toll there is severe in a different way. The Old Trails, Fairview, and Autumn Lane fires have collectively destroyed over 640 structures. These fires forced evacuations affecting an estimated 5,000 homes, with roughly 60,000 people evacuated across the broader area at the peak. And here's a detail worth including. A man was arrested and charged with arson in connection with the Old Trails fire specifically. The exact causes of the Fairview and Autumn Lane fires, by contrast, had not been determined as of the most recent updates. The 700 buildings lost in the Fairview fire deserve a moment, as this is a different kind of damage than acreage burned in open rangeland. Sinlahekin and Kaiser Canyon burned through remote forest, threatening infrastructure, but not destroying homes at scale. Fairview, by contrast, moved through populated areas, taking out 700 structures, a number on par with the most destructive wildfire events in the country. 2 fires can share a state and an emergency declaration, and still represent almost entirely different categories of loss on the ground. Here's how the state actually got to a federal emergency declaration, because the sequence matters for understanding how seriously officials are treating this. On Saturday, August 1st, Washington Governor Bob Ferguson declared a statewide state of emergency, citing drought conditions, unusually high temperatures, and high winds, all compounding what his own office called record-setting wildfires. That declaration included a statewide burn ban on most outdoor and agricultural burning running through September 30th. It went into effect right as the National Weather Service issued what it labeled a particularly dangerous situation, red flag alert, rating that day's fire weather risk as extreme across eastern Washington, a designation reserved for only the most severe fire weather conditions. It's worth understanding exactly what separates an ordinary red flag warning from the specific, particularly dangerous situation label attached to this one, because meteorologists don't use that phrase casually. A standard red flag warning indicates a combination of low humidity, strong winds, and dry fuels. The particularly dangerous situation designation sits above that, reserved for the small subset of events where forecasters expect explosive fire behavior, the kind capable of overwhelming normal suppression tactics almost as fast as crews can respond. The National Weather Service issues that specific enhanced warning only a handful of times in a typical year across the entire country, which is why its appearance over eastern Washington on the same day the governor declared a statewide emergency wasn't a coincidence. Both were responding to the same underlying atmospheric setup. The same day, Ferguson activated 110 members of the Washington National Guard, adding to 27 helicopter crew members activated earlier in July. The State Fire Marshal's Office mobilized 13 separate task forces across the zones. It's worth understanding what those task forces and strike teams actually consist of, because the terminology reflects a genuinely coordinated multi-agency response. A task force bundles wildland fire engines together with water tenders, each unit carrying roughly 15 personnel including a designated leader. Structuring the response this way lets incident commanders move entire units between fires as conditions shift rather than reassigning individual trucks. Aerial firefighting has run into its own specific obstacle during this response. Personal drones, flown by unauthorized members of the public, have repeatedly forced authorities to ground firefighting aircraft over the Spokane fires due to serious collision risks. It's a recurring problem at major wildfires nationwide, and this response has been no exception. By Saturday night, the Federal Emergency Management Agency had approved 3 separate fire management assistance grant requests within a span of just a few hours. These grants covered the Sinlahekin, Fairview, and Autumn Lane fires. FEMA noted these were the 7th, 8th, and 9th such declarations in Washington in 2026. Then, on Tuesday, the federal government went a step further, approving the state's request for a full federal emergency declaration. This unlocked assistance for Chelan, Ferry, Okanogan, Spokane, Stevens, and Yakima counties, along with the Yakima, Colville, and Spokane tribes. I want to explain exactly what a federal emergency declaration actually unlocks, because the term gets used loosely online and it's worth being precise. This designation allows FEMA to reimburse state, local, and tribal governments for costs tied to emergency response and protective measures. This includes personnel overtime and equipment, separate from earlier grants, which specifically cover firefighting suppression costs on individual fires. In practical terms, it means the financial burden of fighting these fires doesn't fall entirely on Okanogan and Spokane counties alone anymore. It's worth understanding the mechanics of a fire management assistance grant specifically, since 3 got approved within hours of each other this weekend. An FMAG isn't issued automatically once a fire crosses an acreage threshold. The state must formally request one for each individual fire. FEMA's regional administrator must independently determine the fire threatens damage severe enough to constitute a major disaster before approving it. That's why the approvals for Sinlahekin, Fairview, and Autumn Lane came as separate decisions at 8:16 p.m., 10:55 p.m., and 11:53 p.m., respectively. Each fire had to clear that threshold individually. Let's talk about why this fire season got this severe, tracing back months, not days. The Washington Department of Ecology declared a statewide drought emergency in early April, months before a single one of these fires ignited. That emergency reflected early season drying, below average snowpack, and broader drought conditions building across the region well before summer began. The fire season started May 7th with the Libby Creek fire in the Okanogan-Wenatchee National Forest, suspected to have been human-caused. Fires accumulated through early August, but the scale shifted dramatically when lightning ignited the Sinlahekin Fire on July the 26th. Conditions were already dry enough for it to grow to over 100,000 acres in barely a week, fueled by the intense regional drought conditions. This severe don't just affect trees and grass. The Washington Cattlemen's Association has addressed livestock losses tied to these fires. Ranchers are urged to get any injured cattle examined by a veterinarian immediately, highlighting the hidden costs of such massive disasters. It's an easy detail to overlook in a story of acreage and containment, but it's a genuine part of what these fires cost rural regions. Now here's where I want to be precise about what's actually still uncertain, because a story with this many moving numbers is exactly where exaggeration creeps in if you're not careful. Containment percentages across these fires vary enormously, and that variation is the whole story. Kaiser Canyon, at 48%, is a fire crews are genuinely gaining ground on. Sinlahekin, at 9%, is a fire that's still overwhelmingly active despite over 1,500 personnel assigned to it. Little Giant and Brady Hill, both still at 0%, represent fires where containment lines simply haven't been established yet at all. Reporting on this event as one uniform disaster, rather than 5 fires at 5 genuinely different stages, would flatten a distinction that actually matters, enormously for anyone living near any one of them specifically. It's also worth being direct about what containment percentage does and doesn't tell you, since it's a term that gets thrown around without much explanation. Containment refers to the percentage of a fire's perimeter that crews have secured with a control line, whether that's a cleared strip of land, a natural barrier, or an actively defended edge. It does not mean the percentage of the fire itself is out. A fire at 9% containment can still be burning intensely inside that perimeter. Containment measures the boundary crews have secured, not the fire's remaining fuel or intensity within it. So here's the honest, complete picture of what's actually burning across eastern Washington this week. 5 separate fires, ignited independently, are burning simultaneously across a state that declared a drought emergency months in advance, and watched conditions deteriorate into what the National Weather Service itself labeled an extreme, particularly dangerous fire weather situation. One of those fires alone has already grown larger than the city of Chicago, threatened the water and power infrastructure an entire county depends on, and pulled in National Guard troops, 13 task forces, and now both state and federal emergency declarations, all within 11 days of a single lightning strike. If there's one sentence to take away from this video, let it be this: the difference between a wildfire that becomes a genuine regional emergency and one that quietly burns out on its own usually isn't the spark that starts it, it's the months of drought sitting underneath it, waiting. There's a broader pattern worth sitting with here too. Washington's Department of Ecology flagged the drought risk back in April. The National Weather Service flagged the extreme fire weather risk on the exact morning it materialized. FEMA approved emergency funding within hours of receiving each state request. At almost every stage, the institutions responsible for tracking this kind of risk saw it coming and responded on a genuinely fast timeline once conditions turned. The fires still grew to over 300,000 combined acres anyway, which says less about anyone failing to act and more about just how much fuel. 4 months of drought had quietly stacked up across eastern Washington before a single spark ever landed. It's also worth noting how quickly these numbers are still moving even as this video comes together. Some fire information sources have already reported Sinlahekin climbing past 126,000 acres and 20% containment, figures newer than the ones cited earlier. That's not a contradiction. It's simply the nature of tracking an active incident that updates multiple times a day across multiple independent reporting agencies. Whatever the exact number is by the time you're watching this, the underlying story, 5 fires, 1 drought-driven season, and a state and federal response racing to keep pace with it, remains the same. We'll keep tracking containment numbers on all 5 of these fires as they update, because that's genuinely the number that tells you whether this is turning a corner or not. Subscribe so you're here for that update. Drop a comment and tell me if you're in eastern Washington right now, or if smoke from this has reached wherever you are. We'll see you in the next one.